Folks, could I have your attention, please? Hello?
It should be more.
If I could have your attention, the mics are all on. They should all be on for all of you. And I'm going to go put us live here in a moment, so if you could hold it down. Okay, good evening, everybody. This is a study session for February 9th of 2016, Littleton City Council. We're joined tonight by the members of the Planning Commission, the Planning Board, and we're going to be talking tonight about change. So I want to say a few moments, if I could, just to get us started. Tonight, we're going to have 3 items on the agenda. We're going to talk about the RTD Mineral Station Area Plan. We're going to have a discussion about streetscape along downtown area and on up through Littleton Boulevard. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Enzer update and future planning discussion. We'll have the planning board for us here for agenda item number 1 here at the table. And then certainly they can stay if they'd like to, but the conversation for agenda items 2 and 3 will be just for city council.
But they can stay.
But they can stay. They're welcome to stay. There is a theme in the things that we're talking about tonight. The theme is we as a council have the opportunity to look about 20 years out. Now, we can choose to do nothing. We can choose to adapt certain ideas and plans and concepts for 20 years out, or we can really decide to continue to talk about it. And as somebody who I talked to today said, "But you've been talking about that for 20 years already." And so in reflection of city council, not so much reflection of us in the room. But that is part of the challenge, is we have been talking about this, but meanwhile, change has been occurring. And my experience is change is going to happen. And as one person explained to me, you can choose to embrace change, but it's kind of like the river. If you're in the river and you're not moving down up the river, you're moving down the river by doing nothing. So you just don't get a lot of choices in today's world. It's a very faster moving world, particularly since the emergence from 2008's recession. What it did was it put everything on hold, and a lot of people developed plans. And when the recession, as we're working our way out of it, and it's certainly not over yet for everyone, it'd be wrong to say that, but folks who have been thinking about it are now starting to take action. And that is the world that we're in and that we've been elected into as council and what we've been appointed to on the board. So my suggestion is for tonight, think through a little bit some of these ideas, ask some questions, think about what this means to Littleton, decide how it impacts you and the people that you know. Each of us may have a little different point of view. Think about the future that you see for the city, and see where perhaps we can, at the end of this, have a few questions that we can direct back to staff to try to manage and wrestle with those concepts. So the idea tonight is the council and the planning board, and particularly on this first item, are going to get a chance to ask questions and flesh it out a little bit with the folks that are making the presentation. The one thing I'm asking, and they've asked, they would like to hold questions till the end of their presentation. It's not that long. They're really opening it up for discussion immediately right after that. And just to make sure everyone has a chance to ask a question, that nobody is the Horseshack from back in the days of Welcome Back, Kotter. If we could have, yeah, exactly. If we could move around the room, I'm not particularly expecting that everybody has a question. If you don't have that time and you would like to pass it on, that would be probably beneficial. But I do want to make sure, because we don't always do this with the planning board, that everybody gets a chance to talk. Also tonight is really brainstorming. We're not, on this item 1 particularly, we're not trying to come to a consensus on an issue. We're trying to come to a consensus on an expectation, perhaps, that staff comes back to us with some ideas. One of the thoughts that we're going to talk about later is, are there things that we can do as a city that would represent a philosophy that we're interested in a certain kind of thing to come here? You know, none of us in the city government have the money to make these developments happen. It's private folks who bring the money to do the development. But if we can through our discussion and our brainstorm and our thought process for the next 20 years out, show that this community is interested in certain things, that's I think the way we can move toward this. We can sit and talk about all the things we don't want, but that's not going to help us move toward that future. I think if we can find some things we do want, then perhaps that discussion will take us more successfully in the 20 years out. So with that kind of preamble, we're going to have our first presentation. I want to turn it over to Jocelyn to make introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are having a presentation today about the light rail planning process we're starting with Mineral, and then the second one will be for downtown later on. As you know, summer last fall, we contracted with the firm of PUMA, Progressive Urban Management Associates, to undertake these both planning processes, and tonight they're here to kick off the Mineral Station, light rail station planning. That's the project we're taking on first, and so they're presenting the scope of work and feedback. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and give you the presentation.
Great, thank you. My name is Brad Siegel. I've actually visited with the council in a similar work session about 2 years ago. So those of you who were sitting on council at the time, we talked about different trends that are shaping communities, not only throughout the Front Range, but throughout the country, and what that might mean for Littleton. So I'm delighted to be back with a team that has initiated work on looking at the future of the Mineral Station. We're at the very beginning of the process, so tonight is our opportunity to get acquainted with you, have you get acquainted with us, and also talk about expectations. So if we're going into a planning process, we really want to hear from council members and planning commissioners about your expectations of this process and what you'd like to see us accomplish before we're done. Now the slide, I know we're looking ahead for the next 5, 10, 20 years, but we would be remiss to not talk about today. And our project manager on this project, JJ Folsom, who you'll meet in just a moment, happened to be downtown Denver, just one of the million individuals down there, and we wanted to demonstrate that the city's machinery was being used extremely well and being respected, and actually it was a fantastic event today. I don't know if the newspaper says 1 million people down there, and maybe most importantly, 1 arrest, which is just, frankly, just remarkable.
And I'm innocent, dang it.
Which?
I told Phil. Sorry, Phil.
So we'll do this the old-fashioned way.
Worked earlier.
Uh-oh.
You're frozen.
I'm frozen.
I was only kidding. Everybody's Googling.
Aha! See, we troubleshooted already.
There we go. Now it's working.
So let me tell you a little bit about us, and you're going to be well consulted on this project. We have a group of colleagues that are working with us. We will be working on both Mineral and also downtown. So we are going to be working with you certainly over the next year and beyond. Who we are, PUMA, Progressive Urban Management Associates, we are both planners, but we're also economists. So when we work on different planning projects, we really look through a market lens and try to understand the market dynamics of a community or a site that we're looking at. And I'd suggest to you that makes us a little different than a lot of planning firms out there. So we're really trying to balance what's real in terms of market reality, what are the opportunities, and we're balancing that with the aspirations of the community, what the community really wants to see. And then hopefully coming up with some ideas and some concepts that will best match, first, what Littleton wants to see at Mineral, and then ultimately how transit also impacts downtown. In terms of myself, I'm from Denver, born in Denver, just lived through my 8th Super Bowl, but very happy with certainly the outcome this time around. Been involved in community and downtown development work for about 30 years. I got started in this in lower downtown Denver in the late 80s. I ran a storefront business support office at the time, and those of you, how many of you have been in the Denver area for 30 years or more? So, yeah. So you'll recall, lower downtown at the time was pretty empty, a lot of empty warehouses, not a lot going on. I used to work for the Downtown Partnership there, the Downtown Denver Partnership, back in the late 80s, early 90s. The last, now we're in our 23rd year, the 23 years of our firm. We've worked in 35 states, about 150 cities, and it's been a great ride. We've been able to learn from a variety of different cities, best practices. We've also learned from mistakes of other communities, and we certainly apply that knowledge to our work. Your project manager on both projects is JJ Folsom, and JJ is going to come up and introduce himself.
Hi, thanks, Brad. I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself. Brad will finish this portion of the presentation, and then I'll start. So I've been in Denver, the Denver metro area for 20 years now. Actually started my career in Colorado with a fellow named Jim Charlier, who's sitting over here. Taught me everything I know about multimodal transportation planning. And then I went on to work for firms such as Civitas and MIG as an urban designer and planner. So I have expertise in both in landscape architecture, urban design, and urban planning. So I've also worked on several station area master plans over the last 5 years in the Denver metro area. Most recently, I worked on the Lucent Boulevard station with Douglas County and RTD. I worked on the Sheridan station on the West Line with the City of Denver and the City of Lakewood, and then I worked on the Commerce City station with the City of Commerce City at 72nd Colorado Boulevard. So I have a lot of expertise and experience working on station area plans, and I'm looking forward to working on both the Mineral Station and the Downtown Station. A lot of opportunities at both those stations.
And JJ and I, we are 25% of our firm. So we're a fairly small firm. There's 8 of us. And what that means is we get very involved in our projects. We're not a planning mill that is balancing dozens and dozens of projects. So when we get involved in a planning project like this, we do roll up our sleeves and really work in partnership with the community. Just a bit about our role in this. We've got both the downtown and community development background and also the transit background, so it's sort of a unique combination of skills hopefully we're bringing into this. I mentioned our market bias and the fact that we're also economists in addition to planners. We have worked in a variety of different environments in terms of community involvement, and we have a good understanding of how to engage a variety of different interest groups and make sure that folks are heard in a process like this. It's not on the slide, but oftentimes I'll say one of the best qualities of hopefully of a consultant is that we're good at therapy. You know, hopefully we're good listeners and we can really understand the nuances of the community. We're also involved very heavily in implementation. We are well versed in public-private partnership. This will be increasingly important as we look not only at Mineral but also downtown. Because it'll be imperative that any new investment, any improvements, whether they're passive improvements or active improvements, it'll most likely require partnerships between both the city and landowners, business owners, a whole variety of different folks. I mentioned we have a whole variety of consultants working with us. We have a group called Dig Studio. They're also a relatively smaller shop in downtown Denver. They're involved in urban design, so you'll be meeting those folks. Starboard Realty, that's a gentleman by the name of Bruce O'Donnell, and he's a numbers guy. So when we meet with developers or if we meet with property owners and we talk about the economics of a site, Bruce can help us there to really understand what's real and what's not real, frankly. Felsberg Holt, they are transportation engineers. You've probably worked with them in other projects in the city. They're a fairly large firm, and they have a relatively small role, actually, in these projects. Place Matters is a group that helps with community involvement, and particularly when we're working with neighborhood associations and HOAs, Place Matters will be helpful in terms of hopefully some fun and interactive ways to get folks involved. We know that community forums can get spirited sometimes, and we don't want to restrict any of that, but we also want to try to help communities in the neighborhood be creative in this process as well. And then lastly, Stream Design. This is another small group in Denver that's done some work in Littleton in the past as it relates to some of the park and river work here. I did mention the market-based approach, and again, had the pleasure of being in front of this group a couple years ago to share some of our trend analysis. So we will take a fair amount of time, particularly over the next couple months, really understanding the market and what is influencing the market right now. As the mayor said, we're at a pretty interesting time because not a lot has happened for 4 or 5 years, and then boom, the last 2 or 3 years, we're watching the whole Front Range change right in front of us. And change can be very difficult. It can be scary to some folks. So if we can understand those market dynamics, and I think ultimately if the Planning Commission, the City Council, if this plan can somehow influence and manage change, hopefully that will be success. Because change unfettered sometimes can have results that can be a little frightening. And the last piece I wanted to mention before I hand it to JJ, just give you an overview of the mineral project, is our emphasis on implementation. So as we go through this, as we work with the community, as we get to know all of you better through this process, we'll come up with some ways to really lead implementation and how these visions can actually happen at these different sites. Very, very different sites. You couldn't have 2 different transit sites in any community, I would wager, in the whole RTD system than Mineral and downtown. So this is no cookie cutter process coming up. We're really going to be looking for your help to help us tailor these plans to the unique sensibilities and the unique dynamics of both these sites. So JJ is going to give you about a 5-7 minute overview of what we learned so far on Mineral in our whole 3 weeks of liftoff here on the project. And then we do have some questions for you that we'd like to ask you tonight.
Thank you, Brad. So this slide here represents our study area. So what I like to say is that everything within that yellow line is about where probably 75–80% of our focus will be in that area. So let me see if this pointer works on here. So we have Aspen Grove, the existing Mineral Station Park and Ride, the apartment complex behind, and then the large Enzer property, the animal hospital. So predominantly focusing on that. But with that said, we will be meeting with all the surrounding neighborhoods. We've already held a few interviews and focus groups in which we met with HOA leaders and interested and active residents in each of the communities that you see on the map. And as part of our market study that Brad mentioned, we will be going even beyond that into a 5 mile or so radius of what is the market area and capture area for this station. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but briefly, our scope is about a 7–8 month process, and as Brad mentioned, we're just getting started. We just held some interviews last week with a couple of you folks too, looking, and we're doing all our existing conditions analysis. So we're getting our base mapping together. We're getting all the files from RTD and doing mapping. And our next step in the next couple of weeks here is to begin to meet with some of those HOA groups that Brad mentioned. So we'll be working with Place Matters on our team, and we've already identified the neighborhood groups to meet with. We've already started our market assessment. We'll have a draft of that by the beginning of March. And then throughout March and April, that's when we'll be starting to work on land use concepts and ideas, and really focusing on the circulation of the study area, how you get from these neighborhoods to the park and ride via alternative modes, not just driving automobiles to the park and ride. Identifying additional parking needs will be a big component of that, and really looking at what type of uses could be on the mineral station, more than just a surface parking lot, as what opportunities are there for mixed use, commercial, office, retail, and structured parking potentially. So we'll be looking at that. That's one of the big roles for Felsberg Holt on the team. We're also going to be meeting with the Enzers and the development team out of Austin. The name's drawing a blank right this second. But anyway, we'll be meeting with them either via phone or actually in person. And then the DDR folks that own Aspen Grove, we've made contact with them as well. So we'll be talking to them. They're very interested in what this project has in store. So then in the early spring, early spring, beginning of summer, that's where we really begin to refine some of these alternatives. So that we'll have all the market information that will influence what type of design alternatives that Dig Studios comes up with. We'll be analyzing all of that. We'll be going to the community to get feedback on those alternatives, and then working towards preparing a draft plan. We'll be coming to you again in April for another joint session, and in that meeting we'll actually have lots for you to look at and talk about. So today's just the overview of the project. In that one we'll actually be talking about here's what the market study says, here's what the design team has come up with, here are a whole bunch of different options to get feedback from you all. And then middle of the summer we'll be preparing a draft plan and then come back to you with that draft plan, and then hopefully a final plan for adoption in August. And then that's when we would begin the downtown process. So in our interviews, we had a marathon day a couple weeks ago, and 10 one-hour interviews at the museum, and these are some of our key takeaways from those interviews. Circulation is very, very important we met with a lot of users of the transit station. So circulation, not just from a driving standpoint, I mean that is kind of a mess too with the traffic on Mineral and the traffic on Santa Fe, but circulation once you get out of your car, or if you didn't arrive by car, walking, biking, bus, getting through the parking lot. And how you get to Aspen Grove and to the river. That was a big deal from a lot of the neighborhoods. Is it's difficult to get to the river. I mentioned Aspen Grove. A lot of people said that they didn't necessarily want to see big boxes on the Enzer property. We know this will be a major issue. And then additional parking. This station, looking at the entire RTD system, is one of the most utilized stations, probably the top 2 or 3. And that park and ride, if any of you use that, it fills up at 7 a.m. 1,100 or 1,200 spaces full at every day. Every weekday. So highly, highly utilized station. So looking at, do we need more parking? If we do more parking, how do we mix that with other uses too? And then neighborhood services. It's a predominantly suburban neighborhood. There aren't a lot of uses there for the neighborhoods. Aspen Grove has a few, but we heard from a lot of folks that they would like to see more neighborhood-oriented services, your dry cleaners, your child care, those kind of things. And then I already mentioned that the traffic, people are concerned with the traffic, where this is a transit station, so how do we make it easier for people to use the transit and reduce some of that traffic? And then we met with a few people that live up on Jackass Hill, and they're very concerned about their views. There's a picture on the left. They have spectacular views down to the river and to the mountains, so there's concern with that. So any type of development that happens on there needs to take consideration of the views. So as the mayor mentioned at the beginning, what we want to do here before we get into these questions, I believe, is just kind of go around the room individually and hear from you all. What do you want to see from this project? What questions do you have about our scope and our process?
Sure, and for some of us, we're kind of hearing it for the first time, so maybe the juices aren't flowing yet. But because time is going to catch up with us, I want to make sure that everyone gets a shot at voicing an opinion or a thought or a feeling about this whole issue. And I do want to tell you one thing. This whole production is being done partially by grant money from RTD, and RTD is interested in this outcome. RTD understands in some strange way for RTD that That parking lot was never done right initially. There was always a promise for that back portion to be completed. It never got completed. Well, probably that's the good news now, because it's not completed. We don't have a structure there to deal with. We have some real raw land that something could happen. So the potential for RTD involvement from the very get-go is very high, and their willingness to see something different there, if that's what the community wants, is very high. And I thought just stress that from the start. Can we start with Kurt, maybe, and then we'll go up on around this way?
One of my biggest concerns would be the mobility back and forth from the north end of that site all the way to the south end, and what you would have bike lanes, pedestrian crossing over.
Can you make sure you have a mic there? Just so,
And crossing over Mineral. So that would be
Right.
one of my biggest concerns.
Between the Enzer property and the park and ride.
Right.
Yeah.
That's about my question right now.
Great. Mr. McManus.
A lot of people don't know who he is.
They do now.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I went down for the parade today and seeing tens of thousands of people on light rail. I took light rail down.
Yeah.
We have the opportunity to do something great for the community, something that, we can all be proud of, hopefully 20, 30, 50 years from now. I concur with the big box idea, but as I understand the zoning on the property, that's kind of what it's currently zoned for. And it's dated zoning, coordinating all the interests, the property owner, the community's interests, what's best for Littleton going forward. Those are my kind of big picture objectives.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I'm happy to hear that you guys have economics background. I'm very interested in the market assessment and the process for that, and how it relates to our surrounding county and other communities around here. So I'm interested in learn more about that process and actually see that market assessment once you guys are completed with it.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little insight on the market assessment, we've defined a market area that is similar to the RTD user area. So RTD actually, they record license plates, and they track who's using the station. And what was fascinating to us is that the user pattern for that station is almost identical to what Aspen Grove told us as their market. So it includes a lot of Highlands Ranch. It includes a lot of the area to the west that's north of C-470. And it's almost a horseshoe that is around there. So we're gonna look at that catchment area, because these are people who are already in the habit of coming down here.
Really quickly, does the plan for it to go over to Lucent? Will the light rail be extended, or is Mineral?
The long-term
end for
plan.
now.
So as I mentioned when I introduced myself, I worked on the Lucent
Yeah.
Boulevard station area plan, and RTD was trying to get funding to implement that as part of Fast Tracks. They were not able to get that. So now it's 20 years out. 2040 is what they're telling us.
So for our thinking, it's the end of the line for the.
This is the end of the line for all purposes of this study, for sure, yeah.
Fairly new to transit stations. Oh, sorry. I guess, are there any primary elements that are needed for a successful station? I mean, obviously they may be different but is it, like you said, parking? Obviously, if we increase the transit use, parking's going to become serious. So I assume that Aspen Grove and anything else really has to be almost connected so that people can pass back and forth. But what are there elements that you actually look for that you want in place?
Well, the big one is residents. You want people to live near a transit station so they don't need to use a car. So, like he said, if you live in that area, or ideally if you live right next to the station, as I showed, there are a few apartment buildings there, and you work in downtown Littleton, or you work in Inglewood, or work in downtown Denver, you're able to utilize the rail for all your work trips. So you're eliminating vehicular trips off the highway. Retail uses, very important near a station. So your coffee shop, your dry cleaners, your restaurant, a cafe. So when you arrive to the station, if you are driving or walking or biking, you have somewhere to go before and after, some type of market where you can pick things up on your way home. So you're not having to put another trip on the road. So you get off the train, go pick up that item you need for dinner, and then you hop in your car or your bike or the bus and move on. So those are some of them.
Yeah, I would add, I think a particular challenge for all of us on Mineral is its end of the line. And an end of the line station is different than some of these midline stations, and they oftentimes become what we have. They become sort of a commuter-only type destination. What's intriguing to me, and I don't know what this is going to look like, is how do we balance that? How do we balance the fact there's always going to be that demand as end of the line with the opportunity to actually create some sense of community there where the vacant land is, and also a connection to some of the neighborhoods around it? Because it's striking to us. A first impression is how difficult it is just across Santa Fe.
Yeah, this is a major
To
barrier.
get to the station. I mean, there's no clear path for people who live there to walk down there, to ride their bike down there. So we'll be looking at some connection issues, how to connect the existing neighborhoods to that station. But then ultimately, back wearing the market hat, the market assessment hat, how do you balance this unique end of line with a desire, I would think, that reflect more of what Littleton is and what it could be there. It's going to be a fascinating challenge that we work on with you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to comment on what you just said. There's no connection from this side to the other side, because we sometimes go to that station rather than the one that's closer, and we walk. Sometimes my husband bikes to work, and he bikes down there and over. There's a very nice way to get there. Just a hell of a lot of people don't bike or walk. So that's part of the challenge. I'm not too much wanting to say what I'd like, because you talk about doing a study and you want to know what the community wants, and I want that to help guide us. If at all possible, I want to try to preserve what people already love about Littleton and its that area's proximity to such wonderful open space parks, so forth. But I want to know what the citizens want. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad and JJ. Couple of questions and statements as well. Number one, in addition to being a light rail location, you have the intersection of Santa Fe and 470 that's there. And so that creates some opportunities as well as additional challenges. To the west, you have a park that's somewhat of a jewel along the South Platte, at least south of Denver, as a wonderful area. You have some bike trails as well as visiting trails that are very near to this location. And so that creates both those opportunities and challenges in this. If you ask me to start to think about it, originally some of the apartments and such at Aspen Grove were going to build gradually from the river. It's an intriguing concept to me to be able to say, hey, you have a park view, you have a mountain view that exists there, and what fits with that. And I'll let your economist minds take you wherever you want to go on that. The connection across is something that's not done well all along Santa Fe until you get north of 6. And there's no sense of neighborhood, and it's a very difficult cross that's there. I personally use the RTD bridge when I'm riding my bike to get down to the trail, so I know that there's ways to get there. Or you can be up the trail a little bit and go across Lee Gulch, and you're going under Santa Fe. So there are some opportunities, but how do you build on some of that? And my stretch thought would be, it's not intended for this to be an end-of-line station. And how do you build in not just the connection to Lucent, but the connection all the way to the southeast line?
Yes.
Where the rights-of-way exist and can, as you're involved in implementation, it's how do you get that association so that at least some of that partnership, both between Arapahoe and Douglas counties and Jefferson County, can actually be one of those things that could see something like that, along with some employers, see some of that happen. It will be an interesting station no matter what, because it will be that southwest corner to the light rail as it will exist. Opportunity possibly to manage some expectations around what are some of the elements that are going to be included in that April market assessment. I can dream on all sorts of things. You may want to help manage what dreaming we might have to say, what are the components that are going to come out of that so that we have something that's there. And when you talk about the 75 to 80%, and then you talk about the surrounding neighborhoods, there's pretty wide swath when you start talking about the 5 mile component, because you have South Jeffco's Business Improvement District that's there. You have the Metro District with Highlands Ranch, but you also have some unincorporated areas in addition. So that I think is very good. I'm very interested in the implementation side that comes along, and what role you might have in building cooperative coalitions to see that what indeed will be a dream and desire that coalesces all of these diverse thoughts that are out here into something that everyone can be excited about, and as Brian and RC mentioned, something that we can be proud of for decades. And so those are some of the things that are pretty important. I will expect that some sort of structured parking may come out of this, but that's expensive. So as economists, it's going to be how do we actually make that practical to move it to that implementation would be one of the thresholds I would put out there. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Doug.
I'm perplexed on what the end product is and how it's going to be used. What is the vision for the vision that results?
Well, the end product is really a land use strategy, and how can Littleton, how can the city leadership influence land use and development patterns there? So it will also not only look at the site itself, but it'll look at connections to various assets around there. I'm also glad that the prior council member, Commissioner Phil, brought up the notion of the park and the river, because that is an amazing asset. It's very unique. It also begs of some sensitive transitions that need to happen on this site. So it's a detailed land use strategy. It also looks at different tools that the city may or may not have currently, that maybe there's some additional tools that the city needs. And it's not necessarily a development plan as it is a land use strategy that'll balance a whole variety of variables. It's interesting, because when you first look at it from the outside, if you're not from here, and I'm from 20 miles up the road, but if you're not from here, you look at it and you say, oh, this isn't that big a deal. This is just, this is what? It's just a relatively small piece of property. There's 7 or 8 landowners. Well, I think we've gathered in our initial work here, this is intensely important for Littleton. It's one of the largest pieces of land that's still on the corridor, on the Santa Fe corridor. It's a gateway, really, into the community. And it really will be setting expectations for a lot of folks. So I hope I answered your question, but it really is it's a detailed land use strategy and plan.
Well, that sounds something like a comprehensive plan, which I would expect the Planning Commission to be taking the leadership. They are, in fact, by law, required to come up with the comprehensive plan. So, and I'm concerned that we actually have a comprehensive plan to handle NZER, because if NZER does come up for a rezone, and I realize that's a stretch, we need a comprehensive plan to guide the rezone on NZER, because PD plans have to conform to a comprehensive plan. So if we have no comprehensive plan, it becomes difficult to justify a decision for or against a particular rezone. So if this is just another study that's going to be done while we don't get a comprehensive plan or a small area plan or whatever it is that we want to call for the NZER property, then I think it's not the proper time to do that. My other concern is what happens north of Mineral is very, very different than what happens south of Mineral. If you're talking structured parking north of Mineral, I don't know what you're going to put in there to justify the cost and the need of structured parking, because you're not going to put a structured parking on the north side of Mineral to service anything on the south side of Mineral. And you don't have that much land. You're mostly built out on the north. So if RTD wants to put a structured parking in because their parking lot's overflowed, then more power to them. Let them come up with the money. So the north side is, I think, pretty limited and pretty specific. The south side is very wide open. The north side is, whatever's left is specifically for the transit stop. The south side is probably going to be entirely auto-driven. Big boxes don't thrive on people riding on light rail to come and buy big televisions and take them home on light rail. Aspen Grove was not pleased on having the light rail station there, just as Park Meadows did not want the light rail station next to them. They don't see light rail station helping their economics. So my big concern is, what are we actually going to do with this? And who should be in charge of this? And how is that process going to go through where it's actually, if it becomes a comp plan, it gets approved that we can use for a rezone?
Great, thank you. Hi, Brad. Hi, JJ. And Brad, thanks for reminding us that you were here last year, because I was looking at you going, where the hell have I seen that guy before? And it wasn't GQ magazine. I wasn't thinking that. So,
Just dissed you.
how long was this thing on?
I thought it was fair.
That's why I was arrested.
Mine are just a couple of observations or things that, if you will, just have this in mind. One is that parking lot has always been a sore spot for me, and I think of a lot of folks. It's one of the ugliest parking lots around, I think. I'm disappointed in what we were told it would be and what it is today. The other thing I don't care for so much is that it is a commuter parking lot, and the idea that Littleton provides parking for folks that are primarily not Littleton folks. Yeah. And while we do get some benefit from those that go over to Aspen Grove, for the most part, we're just providing a large space for people to park that don't belong to us. So the economics is a key piece of the puzzle here, or the area for me. So if we'll keep that in mind. My last thing is that protecting the park. You had mentioned that the limited access. I think the limited access is what helps to keep that park feel like it is so out in the woods somewhere. It's because you don't have all kinds of people running in there right from their car with their coolers and things like that. So providing more access is something that I think would be damaging to the park. So that's it. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, playing a little bit off of what Phil said about the whole aspect of it being into the line. Not only is it an into the line station, but it's the most southwestern corner of our community. And I think the challenge is, and I appreciate the broad scope that you guys are taking, kind of casting a larger net than you may otherwise. Because even the development that's happening outside of our community in the southwest area is something that I think needs to be considered in this. Sterling Ranch, within the next 20 to 30 years, will be a community probably, about half the size? Well, probably, what did they say, 20,000 homes? So Littleton has 20,000 homes. So I think that's a consideration. And I think that the other part of it is that there is an awful lot of things that are happening along County Line. We have a huge business park that stretches from Santa Fe to Broadway and borders County Line and Mineral. And so that's a huge economic engine for this city. When you look at the sales tax revenue that comes in, that South Park area is substantial. And I think that it is also about just how does Littleton, we want to have our greatest benefit from it, but it is really probably one of those places that will be shared so much broader than the city. I think the numbers that will come in off of the light rail parking, I would speculate probably less than 20% of them are Littleton residents. And I think the same thing with Aspen Grove, and I've spoken to them down there, and they said we would not have made it past year 2 if we depended on the Littleton zip code for sales, which is quite unfortunate in my opinion. I wish Littleton would do a little more shopping over there. But I think those are some of the challenges, and maintaining what Littleton wants. Peggy talked about, wanting to keep that. I don't want it to look like any corner USA, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that probably the largest use of that area is going to be outside of our community. So.
I had a question. I'm sorry if I missed a meeting, but you alluded to a development team in Austin. Who's that, or who are they working for and on?
They are, from our understanding, they are currently under contract with the Enzers for the property.
them. Okay.
And have been so for up to a year, but we
Okay.
haven't heard much from them. So
Okay,
I could get you their name. It's in my.
that's okay.
It's Endeavor. I think that's.
Yeah,
the
that's
group.
it.
I
That's
just
it.
wanted to make sure that I knew
Yeah.
what you were referring to.
Yes.
And then I guess my thoughts were more along what Debbie said, is looking at those other communities, that this site doesn't exist in a vacuum, that there's other things happening in other communities that we need to see. What are they doing? Let's not do the same thing, and things such as that. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I'm actually kind of excited that the city's embarking on sort of a public-private partnership, even for this kind of affair, even for the planning process. So the expertise you guys bring to the table is much appreciated. I'm not a fan of development for development's sake. So we're not in a hurry. We can wait for great. What we're looking for is to have you guys guide us. We went through some effort and approved back in March of 2014 with the citywide plan. That is frankly the most current version of what the city of Littleton has stated it wants to do. And I would ask you to refer to that and really scrutinize the words that are in there, because they were all handpicked, every single one of them. And so with that as some guidance in written form, we'd be happy to answer questions about what we were thinking when we were writing it and the kind of visioning we were going through as that applies. Not everything is applicable to this, but certainly the natural aspects, the outdoor aspects, the dynamic uses of the space, and the transit part. The other words I want to jump out at you is we don't want suburbia. We don't want junk that just lines interstates and looks like everything else as you drive across America. Specifically, we want to rebel against any notion of that that's coming up. Something from the economic development perspective, I've come to learn that I think economic development means somebody else's dollar comes into our community. And so everything that we can do to capture those dollars that we don't do at all with a parking lot right now, even though it's next to a major shopping center, anything we can do to capture those dollars would be there. And then a uniqueness and a draw from the dynamic and the distinctive elements that we're asking for. And then sort of the last thought I'd have is I want transit to be the least noticeable of why this area exists. It is just a moment that exists to get you into that area. And not that I want New York City, I want nothing like New York City, but when you get off the subway and you come out of the rise and you enter the area, you come into an opening. And so I'm not by any stretch saying I want that level of people, but I do want that level of feeling, that level of surprise that's open there as you guys are thinking about it. Two questions. One, I look forward to hearing what you guys come up with between now and April. At the moment, it's kind of vaporware. Sounds great. You look nice. Thanks for coming. But we'd really like to know what we're supposed to. I'm not sure how we're supposed to take that. I'd really like to know, what do we expect in April? What happens between now and then? What's our role into it? And then second, to echo similar to what Doug was saying, a little different. We wind up with a long-range plan or a strategic thing. Do we take this to market? Do we redesign zoning around these things? How proactive do we become with whatever output comes, or what is typically done in scenarios like that? So this isn't just a study. This becomes something actionable that ideally we can turn to a market reality if that's appropriate.
Sure. Let me give you a couple quick responses. My understanding is we've got some flexibility in terms of what the product is here. You know? So as we come up with ideas, and if we're collectively in community and market, we're all in agreement of what we want to do with the site, I don't believe that we are restricted from it being part of the comp plan or being something that can really guide development there. I will tell you that I mean, first impression is that the existing entitlements there date back 30-some years. And that goes back to a world that doesn't exist anymore. So I would hope that out of this process, we can, at a minimum, we can update that vision and that reality for the site. Between now and April, there'll really be a couple things going on concurrently. One is we will be doing concerted outreach with the neighborhoods around there. We've had initial conversation with Councilwoman Brinkman, who represents the area, who has offered to help guide us, navigate us through there. So we'll be having some outreach with some of the neighborhoods and some of the communities that are just adjacent to the area to get their sense of it. And then the market assessment is the other major piece. And it's interesting to me as we went around the table that this is a pretty interesting part of the process. So the market assessment should be substantially completed by April. And that's the point where we sort of balance those two things. What's the community's aspirations, the vision? What do we want that distinctive thing, from a community standpoint to be, versus the market reality today and also moving forward? We're not necessarily going to accept that the market reality in 2016 is necessarily what Littleton has to accept. However, the reality is you may have to react to a development proposal in 2016 or 2017. So we want to give you enough vision so that we're shaping the site and looking what's going on in the future, so that maybe we do wait for that optimal set of circumstances. But know that we're dealing with private property. These folks have rights, and we also want to be in a position to respond to that sooner if we need to. So again, that's sort of a long-winded answer, and I apologize for that. But between now and April, community outreach, market assessment, aspirations versus some market reality, and we'll blend that together in April. And that's a fun part, because that's when we start to actually plan and think about the site.
I guess I'll echo what Andrew said about suburbia and really development, how we've been doing it for...
David?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to pull this over, sorry. How we've been doing it for 40 years or more around the car.
Yeah.
And you look at downtown Littleton and how how vibrant it is as sort of an opposition to that. You can see kind of on the bottom half of that, that picture there, how we've been doing development, and I guess I would, and then you look at the park and ride south of Aspen Grove. There was a ULI study done not too long ago that they just plopped some office buildings down there and called it good. And I guess I would challenge you guys to stretch that and, you know, incorporate some robots and self-driving cars, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, 20, 30 years down the road, the market's going to be a lot different, and, you know, hopefully we'll have more bikes, more cars, more different types of transportation. And you know, as you guys have alluded to, both to the park and crossing Santa Fe, there's not a lot of connection for pedestrians or bikers or any other type of transportation other than cars. And I don't know if even talking to the neighbors really helps a lot, because everybody's kind of stuck in that box of development that, you know, how we've been doing things. And, you know, 30 years down the road, well, maybe the light rail will go down to, you know, past C-470. The world's going to look a lot different. Sterling Ranch, as Debbie alluded to, is going to be completely built out, likely, you know, doubling the size of the area, and those are people who aren't even going to be heard. I would also add that you mentioned west of here and north of C-470, there's some constituents. There is also a part of Littleton that is south of C-470 that is actually part of the city. Not a huge one, but they also use Aspen Grove and that light rail station. So they definitely draw from a wide area. But you know, one of my biggest concerns would be safety. As I mentioned earlier, just getting connections where a pedestrian or a biker can get into the area without having to encounter a lot of cars, you know, barreling down on them. Even driving through between the two parking lots into Aspen Grove, it's pretty wide and not really pedestrian friendly. I guess there's a sidewalk, but it's not biker friendly by any means. And let's see. And then the last thing that concerns me, at least, is preserving open space. We've got a gem here that has expanded over time as the gravel pits have dried up, so to speak. They've you know, filled them with water and made them into parks, and connecting to Chatfield State Park as well. There is some good connection with the Platte River Trail, but it doesn't really lead anywhere off the trail. And I know we don't have any direct way of, you know, making that happen, but I would, that's, for me to plan for that is ideal.
Another one of our first impressions, because now we've spent some time walking around the site, it can be pretty horrifying there for a pedestrian. They're just, the sidewalks in, there are no sidewalks. You know, the second lot on the west side, you know, obviously was an expansion, is a temporary setup that now is, what, 10 years temporary or something like that. So the point of that is we're not going to be just looking at the big vision here too. We're also going to be looking at what we call quick wins. You know, are there some quick, immediate improvements that we can make in some common sense ways? I mean, for example, if you go into the area, there are a lot of these, what do you call those trails that people make?
Social trails.
Social trails.
Use trails. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
A lot of social, I mean, can we pour some gravel down there and make it a real trail? I mean, so we'll be coming up with some radical ideas, you know, like that can at least in the immediate short term make it a little bit more pleasant, in addition to some of the long-term development prospects that we're going to look at as well.
Great, excellent, thanks.
Well, let me talk first about the site. The site basically has three main streets. It has the river, it has Santa Fe, has Mineral. The river is just as important as the other two. I agree with Jerry that you don't want to penetrate endlessly with connectors from this development to the river, but you still have to have a connection as far as views, ambiance, et cetera. So for instance, you don't have a 2-story, 3-story parking garage fronting on the river. You have some residential stepping up away from the river that gives you your view, takes account the ambiance. So the river is extremely important. The original Santa Fe corridor study that Jerry and I were involved with, I don't think took enough into account the importance of the river. And you can tell by our overall comprehensive plan, the citywide view is extremely important. So to me, it has almost as much importance as Santa Fe. Secondly, the key to this project in my mind is not the RTD current parking, but the Enzer property and the property to the south of Enzer. That's the key. The parking, yeah, you're going to get the $23,000 per parking space to do a covered parking or stacked parking garage. That site's fairly small. Enzer is your opportunity and Littleton's opportunity to be the economic driver for the community for the next 20 to 30 years. The existing, I call it the existing buggy whip zoning of Enzer, if you build according to that, you'll have a ho-hum, big box, not what Littleton wants type of development, Yawn City. What it can be is an incredibly mixed-use development with everything, a credible site, incredible amenities. It would make the streets of South Glen, as I always say, look like a strip mall. But what does it take? It takes rezoning, it takes incentives, it takes a vision, and most of all, from what I've seen in my 20 years, is it takes guts. And so far, Littleton hasn't applied the guts to do anything of this for this property. And I call out guts because we have done 2 Urban Land Institute studies in the last 15, 18 years. My guess is the dust is about that thick, covering them up. Nobody looks at them, and we spent good money on them. So now we also had our corridor study done in 97 and 98. Now we're doing your study. The danger is what happens to the study? What are you going to do with it? Nice to have maybe some quick fixes, but where's our vision? Where's our guts to actually get something done with a site, to do something that Littleton wants and needs and likes?
Great, thank you.
Hi. So I think, what I kind of started with even as we started tonight was I think what's going to be very important for us is to be very clear of the objective and what we are solving for. Looking at this property, while again, some would say this is a small area, if you're looking at other parts of the region, for us, it is huge. And with that, different pieces of it will solve for different things. The way I think about it is, what is the job to be done within the site? What is it that we're solving for, or what opportunity are we creating? So I think it's going to be very important to establish that to help guide all of the many ideas that will come in. Otherwise, I don't think we'll ever get to what implementation can be if we haven't set that objective up front. And there's also a risk that you set the objective at the end, and that's not the way, obviously, not the way we want to do it. So I would just stress that point. And then on the community outreach, you've talked a lot about reaching out to the Littleton community, but we've also acknowledged that 80% probably, if not more, of the users of this area are from outside the city boundaries. So that to me sounds like a target group that we should query and understand what are the things that they want to be able to use, again, to create economics for our city. It's bringing in the money from the outside as well. So I would just ask us to consider that community outreach a little bit broader. And then coming back to, I don't want to assume, so I'm going to ask the question. So you talked about a land use strategy. So what that will imply is that it is not necessarily in conformance with current zoning. This will be a, maybe not a recommendation, but again, a strategy of what to consider as we do the other things that we'll have to do as a planning board, as a council, whether that be comprehensive plan or zoning, or relooking at zoning in some areas. So my assumption is that you will not be constrained within the current zoning, and the intent is, okay, to create that vision.
Correct assumption.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, that makes it around the room. You had 3 questions that you had put up on the slide, and you were going to ask those. We're really out of time, and we do have, I know, at least one other question.
I think we got the
Are you there?
Questions were pretty well answered by this group. You know, we were going to ask about expectations from the process. What do you want us to closely explore? What specific qualities are important to you? So I think we're well equipped, unless you want to go into overtime.
No, I don't want to go into overtime, but I did get a special request. Jerry, you have one more question.
This question was sparked by Council Member Brinkman on the housing. She said how Aspen Grove is not supported by the citizens of Littleton. I think that's absolutely true. With that in mind, a few weeks ago, the city manager gave us a report on the inventory of the housing in Littleton and an analysis of the type of housing, the age, also the demographics of the residents. That was very helpful. And now, as Santa Fe is going to be built out commercially, we're going to be losing some of those folks that we're counting on at Aspen Grove today. So if you will, also maybe keep in mind, what is it going to, who that we hope we can depend on, who will be there to sustain that property economically. And last but not least, as planning board members Renicki and Bolton mentioned, this is at least their 3rd study, and maybe 4, Mark. So I'm hoping we do get a receivable that is very useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've read all those studies, and we'll take your comments into consideration. That we'll go back and reread them and make sure we're doing new stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One comment on the Urban Land Institute studies. The first one that came out, I know that Jerry and I pored over it quite a lot, and I still have written in, and I can read it in the margins, was, wait a load of Littletonites, get a load of this document. It was intense, and it wasn't, and isn't today what I think what my vision of Littleton is, and what I think most Littleton's vision, Littletonites' vision is. It was incredibly dense, high-rise, massive development on a very small piece north of Mineral.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrap it up because our time is up. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And again, this is a multi-month endeavor. There'll be more involvements. This was just really to get everybody thinking and let us all know what kind of thing you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break so we can reset. we're back in session. Everybody's mic should be on. We should be on the air. We're back in session. So part 2 of our agenda tonight is to talk about a streetscape presentation. Jocelyn, can you do the introductions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we were talking about the streetscape project, and as you know, you all had this conversation last fall, spring, or excuse me, summer timeframe, and we did put it out to bid, and we did hire a firm of Civitas. Then I came on board, and looking through that scope, we further evolved the scope to not only include looking at the streetscape and the right-of-way area, so from the sidewalk to the street in that portion, but also really, I think the thing that we want to make sure that we look at for both downtown and Littleton Boulevard is the functionality of the streets, of how they function right now. We really need to get a better handle of some details around the parking and how that fits into the picture, so that we can take all of those components and really be intentional about how we want to look at traffic and access and circulation that can be the foundation, and including improvements to the streetscape. So with that, we have Jim Charlier here tonight to talk to you about the scope as proposed today, and looking forward to your input and feedback and next steps. I'll turn it over to Jim.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for this time on your calendar. Let me say, by way of introduction, I have a lot of fondness for Littleton. My grandson and my daughter and son-in-law live in Colorado Springs, and my wife and I live in Boulder. Hope you won't hold that against us. And we meet in Littleton down here behind the Mineral Avenue Station on the river, and ride our bikes up and down the trail, and then we either come into downtown for lunch, or we go to Lucille's for lunch, or whatever. And for many years, I've regarded this as one of the nicest downtowns in Colorado, if not maybe in some ways the nicest downtown. So it's kind of a thrill to be here talking to you about that. The first call I got from Jocelyn, she was asking if I could give her advice about how to compete for one of the competitive grants that an organization called Smart Growth America, that's spending EPA money, does. And my advice to her was that the process is really lengthy. They get about 30 to 40 applications each year, and they're only awarding 1 or 2. So I came down and we had a meeting, and she invited Public Works Director and your Economic Development Director in. And we started with that downtown parking conversation, but then I learned that you have been sort of having a conversation about your downtown streets, your downtown streetscapes, Littleton Boulevard. I'm hearing some agreement with what I just said. And then I reminded them that also you have the team that was just here. They were talking tonight about Mineral Avenue Station, but they also in their scope, and the next step in their project will be to address the downtown light rail station with the same kind of analysis that they were discussing with you tonight. So I suggested that, and this is really where Jocelyn started out too, that you want to take an integrated approach to these things. You know, you kind of want to know that because these things are interconnected, that what you're doing makes sense in a broader way. So that's how we got where we are, and that's why we're talking about an access and circulation plan. So you've been talking about streetscape, and that's going to be an important part of the project, but it's going to be tied in with strategies related to parking and circulation and other issues. It looks like we'll have some things that are very high on the screen there, but I think there are 3 things that make a project like this work, and I want to tell you about each of those. The inspiring vision, that's not us. I mean, I like to think we have inspiring visions, but this is your inspiring vision. What we try to do is foster a process where citizens can feel like they're part of the creative process and can say, what if we did this? Or I think that this is what we should have in the future, what the place should be like in the future. And we like to foster that kind of process. I think we've done it in a lot of places, and we think that will be important here. Littleton is an interesting community. It's an incredibly beautiful place, and it's a place that has pretty specific values about what the kind of place is and what the downtown is like. And I don't think outside consultants can come in and have an inspiration. We need the citizens to inspire us with their vision. Innovation is also important. We are in rapidly changing times. Somebody mentioned automated vehicles a while ago. There are a lot of things going on, ride-hailing, sharing economy, a lot of things that we're all kind of trying to keep track of. We try to do a couple of things. One, we have a firm on our team that I will tell you about in a second that uses innovative techniques for showing people images and helping people imagine what something could look like. And taking what people say, well, what if the sidewalk is wider, and quickly turning it into an image so that they can assess whether that looks good or not, or whether the parking still works. That's Studio Insight, and this is a drawing they did that's based on a photograph, which is one of the many techniques they use. And when we looked for who we wanted to put on the team, I thought that sort of ability to show ideas with images would be really important to you. So that's why they're on the team. And then we also mean innovation. I'll tell you a very quick story. This is Grand Canal in Phoenix. We've been working for Phoenix now for some years. And we were doing a project that had to do actually with the station areas around the LRT stations, the development areas, kind of like your Mineral Avenue station, your downtown station. And we said, you know, you really ought to mature that trail system along Grand Canal. Why don't you do that? It's a huge opportunity. They took that and ran with it, and we did a concept plan for them, and this past fall they got a $10 million Tiger grant to get started building that. So we think that, as Brad was saying about the Mineral Avenue Station project, I think what we all want to do is look for those opportunities as we're working through the project, and if there's something that you might be able to do, try to mature it quickly so that you can chase it and make it happen. And then transparency, you know, as I was talking about Littleton Public, and you know, they're sort of determined to have the community have the values that it has, and they're very sensitive about the changes that might be unwarranted or unwelcome, such as high-density development around a Mineral Avenue station. And so we work really hard to be clear about what would the outcomes of different options be, what does that actually look like, how would you measure it, and then on a lot of our projects, we create dashboards so that they can track. So now I don't know if we'll find out if we're gonna do that for you or not, but we'd like to create the accountability that comes from saying, here's the intended outcome, here's how you would measure that, and here's how you're going to measure it so you can track and see whether that's happening. So those are keys to our approach. Our study area is downtown, pretty much. You know, nobody wants us to plan the Arapahoe Community College campus, but we'll dip down into that enough that we can look at the parking issues, and then up to and including City Hall, and then over to Santa Fe, and then over to the rail corridor, and then Littleton Boulevard all the way to Broadway. Looking at the immediate land uses along it and the arterial corridor itself. I don't want to spend a lot of time touting my firm. We're transportation planners. We're based in Boulder. This is the kind of work we do. Studio Insight is based they're up in Rhino, just north of downtown, and they're very creative, very, very good designers. In my opinion, the best design firm in Colorado. And they'll be doing the technical design work for us. And in Blue Zones, how many people know Dan Burton or have seen Dan speak or been to? Okay. He has agreed to work on this project with us. I'll talk more about that. We work all over the country. We work for big cities, small cities. Remember that we'll come back to this photograph in a second. We've worked a lot in Hawaii, interestingly, and we have a lot of experience with resort and visitor-rich areas, what we call amenity environments. Studio Insight, this is their slide. They have been working up in Cherry Creek for City of Denver, Clayton, the Clayton Avenue work. They did the concept and the design for the new improvements that are you're just now seeing on 14th Street. See this photograph here? They did this photograph, this drawing, as part of a project that we worked on together in Glenwood, which is a much smaller community than Littleton. We realize that, but a really cool community. This is their 7th Street corridor. That is before, that's the vision, the idea, this is the reality. So the sidewalk was widened out, a lot of streetscape improvements. This is now, some of you have been there, is now called Restaurant Row. That's booming. So that kind of transformation. And then Dan Burton, good old Dan, the leading pedestrian expert in the United States. And you know, he's been to the White House a number of times. He's extremely highly regarded. Every time he's around me, I get motivated and work harder, and everybody else does too. Although he's getting older, like I am. So we have, I'll talk you through the tasks that we're proposing. Ordinarily, we wouldn't go into this level of detail, but I understand you had an interest in knowing, council members had an interest in knowing what the project would be. In task 1, we are proposing a project partners committee that would meet at least a couple of times. And we're, the community college is an important part of downtown, RTD, CDOT, Arapahoe County, and the Downtown Merchants Association. Jocelyn and Denise have already been over to meet with the merchants to talk about this project so that they kind of understand what's being proposed. We'll keep them in the loop as we go. The vision workshop is the first major thing we would do that people would be aware of. I don't know the dates because we don't know when we're going to get started, and as you probably noticed from the scope that you're looking at, all of that has to be updated because the schedule is obviously changing. But soon, we would hold this vision workshop, and we would have Dan lead that for us, and it would focus on downtown, although we would also get over into Littleton Boulevard with the idea of, if this was going to be a very walkable place, what would we have to do to make it more walkable? And what are the things to make it safe and make it appealing and make it attractive? Dan does these all over the country. He'll have other people with him, and my staff will be part of this too, and your staff will be too, so it'll be a pretty good team. First day is we do walk audits, we do some discovery, we do a lot of interviews, facilitated meetings. Second day, we have a visioning workshop and some other. So it's a pretty intense 2 days. We'll do it in the middle of the week, probably a Wednesday and Thursday would work best for you. Task 3, this is where we started, updating your parking inventory, which is really important, and you've been doing parking inventories, and then doing a utilization study for you. This downtown is successful enough that parking is going to be always an issue. You never really solve parking. It's always controversial. It's always, one person will say there isn't enough of it, and the next person will say there's too much. We shouldn't have so much. And you're familiar with that debate, I'm sure. And so what we try to do is put some data on it. It's hard to debate policy if you're still debating the facts. And so we try to establish what is a utilization. We'll do 2 counts. We'll try to pick a busy week. We'll work with the merchants and your staff on this to try to pick good times. We'll try to pick a busy week and a slower week so that we get some idea of the difference between the two. We'll do a parking forum, and we actually do get people to come out to those, so that's more interesting than it sounds. And then we'll do a stakeholder workshop where we actually sit down, roll up our sleeves, and start working on what does the ordinance say, what are some changes, are there things that should be changed, how would we do that, and do we have supply issues, or do we just have management issues, and all of that conversation, which you can ask me questions about if you'd like. This, by the way, we do a lot of these. We do this for EPA, we do it for Smart Growth America. We probably do what we call parking audits at least 3 or 4 a year, and in different communities around the country. And so we'll look at supply, we'll look at occupancy, we'll look at turnover and duration. By the way, we usually, in a downtown setting, we'll do Thursday, Friday counts. So we'll count all day Thursday and all day Friday into the evenings. You have some destination restaurants in downtown Littleton. We'll want to pick up that and see what's going on with that. And then task 4, you can't see this at the top of the screen, but task 4 says downtown access and circulation plan. So this is the document that tries to pull this together before we get into design. And we come to you with this so that before we actually start spending any money on drawings, we get sort of some conversation with council about, are we headed the right direction? Are these the right priorities? Do you agree with where we're going? Obviously, we have to address all the modes. Both Littleton and Boulevard and downtown should be thought of as pedestrian-first environments. And that's a change from 25 or 40 years ago, clearly. We believe that we should do these projects in a way that you can keep up with. You don't want it to be a dusty plan on the shelf. You want it to be a living sort of process. And so we build a transportation data book that we give to you. It's accessible to anybody who wants to get it, a citizen or you. It's on your website. You can update it, and you should, as time goes by. And it helps. Again, it's hard to debate policy if you're still debating the facts. And then a prioritized action plan. I know there's a debate, or discussion, I should say, in Littleton about, well, it's a pretty cool downtown. Maybe we don't need to do anything, or do we? Or what do we need to do? Or how do we know we need to do something? And what I would say is that successful downtowns are continually investing in themselves. They can do that strategically. If you've watched the Boulder Mall, Boulder spends money on the mall every summer, every year. They do something. Is the character of the mall pretty much the same as it was 30 years ago? Yeah, pretty much. It's a little cooler. Some of the stuff they've done is pretty cool. So it's not about changing character, but it's about, you got to fix the sidewalks. You got to take care, is the parking working right? Can people get across the street? Could we have a wider sidewalk and encourage more restaurants? That kind of thing, where you're not changing the character, but you're tweaking and you're improving and you're spending money. It's hard to do that ad hoc. Somebody comes up with an idea and you're asked to consider, should we do that or not? It's better to have a plan and know this is what the analysis says is most important. Other things are less important. Let's do this. Task 5 is then, once we've met with you, is we start looking at those priorities and doing drawings. We'll pick some prototype block faces, and you'll be part of that process. We'll come to you and have you help us with that. And we'll do a public event. We like to have some fun while we're doing these things, and I don't know what we'll do yet. We've done poker games where we've had different stores. You go in and you have to go in and sign a log and say hello and talk to the people in the store, and then they give you a playing card, and you pretty soon you've got a hand, and you come back to the where the open house is, and people are cheating. They're trading cards, buying cards from each other and stuff. And then the winner gets a mountain bike or something. We'll figure that out. I don't know exactly what we're going to do. That's what we did in one of our recent projects. Studio Insight is actually proposing, what if we put some nicely rendered drawings on some stands? We will do this in the summer. And people can walk down the street, and here's a drawing that says, here's a change we're looking at here. What do you think about this? So people could actually see where the change would be and what it might look like. We're just toying with these ideas. We'll talk. You'll have more chance to talk with us about these. But we like to have fun with this stuff. We think public process should be fun. People hate going to workshops. And then we'll produce a design concept report that is our recommendations. And that'll come in draft, and they'll get reviewed, and then we'll fix it to make it closer to what you want. But that design concept report will be what Jocelyn, Public Works, and others are using over the years to guide in actual expenditures. Prototype blocks is an interesting downtown. A lot about this downtown is just right. The block grid, the way the streets work. The one thing that's a little hard to tolerate, of course, is the commuter traffic in the morning and evenings coming through town. That's pretty intense. But we'll look at all of that. And then Littleton Boulevard, your gate, this is your front door. It's one of your front doors. Incredibly important street. It's not a terrible street today, but there are a lot of issues out there, and it's what we expect out of a commercial arterial is different in the 21st century than what we expected out of a commercial arterial 30, 40 years ago. And so we have to think about, well, what should this street look like in the future? And what we're proposing to do is something that we've only done a couple of times before. We did it for Redmond, Washington. It worked really well there, which is a great streets evaluation, which I'll probably do myself, which is, here's how this street is functioning today. Here's the experience along the street. And here's what the current state of the art for great streets is, and what's the difference between those two. And then based on that, we'll do some prototype blocks out there as well. You've got some interesting, you're aware of the challenges. You don't need me to tell you about them. You've got these dog-leg intersections. And so that for pedestrians, it's a little awkward. It's safety. We're going to pull safety data. I want to see the safety data. I think too much transportation planning is done without actually looking at the crash data. And so we'll pull that and see if we have hot spots out here. We don't know which, I'm showing you this one, but we don't know what sections we'll actually look at. And the idea then, again there, is to give you a concept design report so that you could, if you could get some grant money, or if you wanted to do an appropriation or a district or whatever it is you wanted to do, you would have a pretty solid basis for estimating what the cost is and a pretty clear idea of what it was you were going to try to do. And then here's the schedule. Jocelyn was, I think, a little surprised when we first talked schedule, because our approach as a firm is we like to get in, do the work, and wrap up and go home. These projects don't gain any momentum when they drag out. And so we've done some pretty We just finished a complete transportation master plan for the city of Brighton in 10 months. And so this is how we like to work. We like to focus. We're a small firm. We don't do a lot of projects at any point in time. We focus on those projects and we really churn. So we won't go too fast. We'll come and see you at appropriate times and we'll involve the public, but we hope to wrap up in 7 months. I don't know what those months are yet. We'll see how long it takes us to kind of get through this process. So summarizing the public events, when we have Dan in town and we do the Pedestrian Downtown Vision Workshop, we'll be doing walk audits. We'll be walking around in downtown. I hope everybody in this room is part of that. Please do come and be part of it. You learn a lot. It's a lot of fun. We'll give you an orange vest and we'll go out and walk around. We'll do a forum that Dan will stand up and do his Pied Piper routine. By the time he's done, we'll all follow him anywhere. And then we'll do stakeholder workshops to kind of drill down on some of the details. The parking audit, I'll do the public forum. We'll do a stakeholder workshop again the next day. That'll be heavily involving the downtown merchants, obviously, downtown businesses, downtown landowners. Streetscape, I've already described. That open house and tour will extend onto Littleton Boulevard. We want to, it's not all that convenient, but we'll find a way to get people over there. Maybe we can pick some blocks that are close. We want people to look at Littleton Boulevard as we're looking at downtown, because it is a network. We always try to take a network approach to this. Here, we're giving you these are the deliverables that are listed in the proposal. They're very specific things. This will come out of the Blue Zones work. This will be our work. We will update your parking inventory. We will give you our audit report, which very specifically says, here's our recommended strategies for how you should be managing parking. You'll have, obviously, the presentations we do for those forums, and we'll do a parking action plan and next steps, which is routine for us. We always do that. You'll have, as I mentioned, the transportation data book. We'll do some integrated multimodal network maps, which end up being pretty important. You probably haven't seen those at the city level before, so that'll be a learning experience for us. As I mentioned, the prioritized action plan, the concepts and drawings, the concept reports. In today's world, shovel-ready is 30% design. At the point that you know what you want to build, you know why, you've been to the public, you've talked about it, you've been to your elected body, you've talked about it, and you know about what it's going to cost, and you know what the right-of-way issues are, at least with some level of specificity, and you have some idea what the utility issues are, and you're looking at it primarily in plan view and cross-section. That's what we call 30% design. At that point, you can hire a design firm or a design build firm and go into the construction. So when we're trying to prepare cities to be in a position where they can fund projects or compete for grant money for projects, we get them to 30% design. So that's what we're trying to do for you. Littleton Boulevard, same thing. Well, you'll have the Great Streets presentation. There'll be a video of it somewhere that you can use. And then we'll do the same thing for Littleton Boulevard. So that's what we're proposing to do, and I can answer questions or whatever.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The earlier presentation from Puma.
Yes.
They'll be doing the mineral first, and so it sounds like they may be getting to downtown about the time you're wrapping up. How are you going to be able to?
The first thing I did after I talked to Jocelyn was I called JJ up because he used to work for me, and I was, JJ, and I said, let's overlap. Let's not hold. Citizens come to a meeting, they're like, what was the meeting last week? And so what we'll do is we'll co-locate some of those meetings, and we'll just, and the timing's working out. That's actually working out really well because they'll be focusing on downtown in the summer months, and so will we. So, and they're pretty pleased because, as you heard them say kind of quietly, that the FHU part of their Mineral Avenue station is pretty small. They don't have a lot of money for that access and circulation work. And so when they found out we were doing this in downtown, it was a little bit of a relief because we'll be able to give them a pretty robust set of kind of network maps and the ideas. And then they can just focus on what they do, which is the economics and the land uses.
So the two reports will have some sort of overlap.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put them in one binder if you want.
Okay.
I have a comment, just, this is a little hard to grasp because we're looking so far in the future and what we know is today. But I can tell you that just from my experience, if you look at the Littleton Boulevard, particularly from Bannock in toward downtown, it used to be more vibrant. it used to be more vibrant than it is now. There used to be a 7-Eleven, there used to be, and I can be, Cherokee Street Restaurant, there were a couple restaurants where Pyramid Liquor was, there was a restaurant. Restaurants tend to create a lot of vibrancy. There was a Safeway, there was a grocery store, there was neighborhood opportunities, there were cleaners, there were all kinds of neighborhood opportunities in Woodlawn Plaza and in the shopping center, and they're gone. They're not there. And I think for folks that are saying, what are we trying to do here? What we're trying to do is bring back maybe the vibrancy that we remembered at one time when it was a smaller, more intimate community. Because it says Littleton Boulevard. That is our namesake. And the same with going downtown into that area. It's not too many days go by that somebody doesn't say to me, so what do you think's going to happen to downtown? And that's kind of a scary, what do you think? What do you mean? Well, I was here in the 70s or 80s, I remember. That could all turn again. So I think the answer is we don't want to leave it to chance. We want to be able to do some things that other communities might have done that guarantee a success. And that's really what I'm hoping to get from you is the vibrancy, the feeling, the supporting the neighborhood concept as far as this is special for Littleton, and really protecting ourselves from the future, because the economic situation certainly is unknown, but if we have a vibrant downtown and a vibrant community, that'll certainly go a long way to getting us through it.
Yeah, Littleton Boulevard is a commercial arterial, and they fall on hard times. I'll mention Colfax. I don't mean to scare heck out of anybody. I'm just saying, they age, they change, and I think it's really important to keep your eye on it and think about what can we do, and how can we keep that alive? How can we? It's like some neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods seem to have to go really far into decline before they start redeveloping. And others somehow seem to catch that and get the reinvestment before that happens. We all know that private sector investment follows public sector investment, but you can't throw money at things. You need to know strategically what's important, what matters, what functionally or experientially would make this a better place. I don't know right now. It's a unique corridor for all the reasons you just described, and it's got a lot of traffic on it. And we're going to see less traffic in the future eventually, but not in the short term. And so I don't think we can plan for a low traffic future in the short term. But anyway, yes, I agree. Those are how we should look at it.
Bill?
Jim, thanks for outlining everything. It gives some additional comfort.
Okay.
First item is you mentioned your early discussion with the partners, having ACC and CDOT and RTD, along with the historic downtown Littleton merchants.
Right.
Recognizing that Littleton Boulevard flows into Main Street, you haven't included folks that are to the east on Littleton Boulevard in that partner.
Who would that be?
Well, I was going to turn to Councilmember Valdez, whose district is there, just to say, hey, maybe there's some interest in how those flow and connect, because when you're talking about commuter traffic, it flows up and down that same street. And so that was one thought. Secondly, on your parking analysis, you talked about coming in and measuring twice, and you mentioned typically a Thursday, Friday.
Right.
Does the Friday, my experience in our downtown is it's a much different situation on a weekend day, meaning a Saturday or Sunday, than it is any of the weekdays. And Friday night is not necessarily as typical of Saturday night.
Which do you think is busier?
Saturday.
Really?
Saturday night.
Okay, well then we can count Saturday. In most cities, Friday nights are actually busier than Saturday nights because there's an overlap of different kinds of activities. But if the destination restaurants are, and you have a couple of pretty cool bars and stuff, and if that's the stuff that's really driving the level of activity in downtown, we'll do a Thursday and Saturday.
And that's my experience, unless you were doing it, but you might have a little bit different experience at happy hour on Friday. So, but once you're past happy hour on Friday, Saturday's busy.
Okay. Yeah, and that varies by city, and we haven't, one of the things that's on our early to-do list is sit down with the downtown merchants and have the same conversation, see what they think. And we're not married to Thursday, Friday. Often that's what we do, and so that's what we put in the proposal. And when I say two, I don't mean Thursdays, one, and Fridays. Yeah, we do 2 Thursday and Friday, or 2 Thursday and Saturday, or whatever. And that's because you want to kind of see what's going on in a little slower period and what's going on in kind of a more peak period. That helps everybody, because there are people who feel, well, anytime I go downtown, I can find a place to park. And there are other people, merchants maybe, who say, the parking's killing us, we're a really urgent issue. And so it's good to have kind of those bookends.
And my third one is, didn't look like it was in the study area, but would have an interest, or at least how does it extend? Originally, the river flowed right in front of Three Chimneys, and that was the historical flow of the river, and it was moved when they put Santa Fe in. And so how do we reach back historically and possibly have that great connection of downtown Littleton back to the river?
I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Well, and access to Santa Fe as well,
Yeah.
because it's not quite in your yellow.
No, it's not, and it's the first time I've heard, it's an interesting idea, interesting concept. Certainly, this sort of question is really important. How does that work? And then, but this over here, I hadn't been aware of. To be discussed further. I think we can look at it. We do a lot of work in communities where there are rivers and where we want to think about what's the relationship between the downtown.
Particularly when you're talking about multimodal, there's now a path along the creek that goes underneath Santa Fe.
Yeah, see, I didn't, I know, we got that in our proposal. I saw that. When we're out here biking this, we've often thought, well, it'd be cool if we could get in. We didn't think we could get into downtown. Apparently there is a way, but we've tended to go to Lucille's instead of come into downtown. Now I know. But that crossing question and that linkage is important. I can see that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Any other questions?
More comment. I taught at ACC for 35 years, and I've talked to people recently about downtown.
Okay.
And they're confirming what I thought. Faculty and students are so busy, they are probably not going to be lurable, at least very many of them, because a lot of the faculty are just busy nonstop, despite what people tend to think.
Did you say lurable?
Pardon? Yeah, lurable, able to be lured.
Okay.
The students, many of them, go to school full-time and work from, yes. And so while I hope that we make it attractive for them, I don't think we should be counting on getting many of them downtown.
Okay. All right. I hadn't been counting on that, but that relationship is a really important one. We did a project similar to this for Columbia, Missouri last year. And the University of Missouri is right at the edge of downtown. And it's a huge influence on downtown and a huge source of revenue for downtown. And that's why I think it'll be helpful to have ACC on the Partners Committee and talking to us about all of that. And I haven't assumed any particular thing about the student and faculty relationship. That's useful input.
Debbie?
I guess I would suggest, I think that ACC is an incredible opportunity that we've always just assumed didn't exist. And I think that there's a way to work them into this plan. One of the things I hear is that, no, they don't want to run over, and they're not going to run up and down the street shopping, and they don't really have time to go sit down for, an hour and a half meal, but that they having opportunity that is more within their lifestyle, which is not just their lifestyle, it's becoming more and more. We just put the schools go into a 4-year. So, and community colleges are not what community colleges used to be.
Well, it's where most of the student body growth is occurring in the
Yeah.
US right now.
And so I think it, one of the, we've put that crosswalk in there, and it is constantly, well, it's always been there, we finally, made it safer, but it's constantly with people crossing the street, so there is integration.
Okay.
Some of them are going into classrooms and stuff
Well,
like
it
that.
sounds
but-
like we need to dig into that.
Well, look at Nevada, because Nevada is shut down there, which I think we should look at that and understand why we totally closed that street
Okay.
off from downtown.
Okay, we noticed that too. So, yeah, I don't know what we'll do. Maybe we can do a focus group with some students or something. We'll think about what we should do, but we'll drill down into that. It sounds like it's a question mark in your minds, and so we'll see if we can shed some light on it.
It looks like a good part of the stuff is, or at least portion of it is being duplicated from what's already happened, or studies that already been done. There is a pedestrian bike master plan that was done in 2011.
Right.
That identifies the connections that supposedly we're going to pay to get done again on this. I don't know why we need to reinvent the wheel. The Planning Commission, after a long period of time, came up with the, sorry, did I leave a long out of there? Yeah. Downtown neighborhood plan, and that part of that, what that addresses is the connectivity between ACC and downtown. You also have a lot of history of people wanting to make that connection work, and it never has. Jose's been around here forever, and had a business downtown. I'm actually somewhat insulted when there's insinuation that seems to be happening that this is the only council that plans for the future and that we have to do it now, or Littleton's going to stagnate. The reason why downtown looks the way it is now is because the council 20 years ago brought in a fellow named Robert Gibbs,
Oh, yeah.
who wrote an article. You're aware of him.
Oh, I know. I just worked with him.
November 1995, in Atlantic Monthly, saying the article was what Main Street can learn from the mall. And he had some very specific concepts, but the basic underlying part of that is many small towns screw up their downtown by ruining the economics, trying to achieve something that they think is pretty. And one of the things that they do over and over again, and as part of his presentation, or it was some 20 years ago, is to restrict traffic through the downtown, to turn commuter streets into pedestrian malls or to slow them down. And he has picture after picture after picture of that. One of the differences on Littleton Boulevard is 25 or 30 years ago, mineral was put through on Ken Carroll as part of a compromise to widen Bowles. Those of you that were here might remember that. That the Bowles folks were adamantly opposed to widening Bowles, and part of the compromise was to put another east-west street through there to remove some of the traffic from Bowles. But what that did was remove some of the traffic from Bowles. So instead of having all of that commuter traffic that came from the west through Littleton Boulevard onto Broadway and then went north or south to get to the office complex at along I-25, it's escaping me, is, so we have less traffic count now than what we had before, which results in less vibrancy. So part of my concern is the smart streetscape, the pedestrian first on your list of transportation modes is not necessarily going to improve the economics of downtown. And I don't want to screw up the commercial value of downtown and the ability of the downtown merchants to make money because we're trying to make it look prettier. The reason why the sidewalks are there, the reason why the benches are there, the reason why they painted the colors that they are all because of the economics of downtown. And so for us to go in and start meddling around with that without having a real, actual strategic plan of how that's going to affect the economics of downtown, I think is a mistake. So I'm not understanding why we're linking Littleton Boulevard west or east of downtown with a downtown plan that's a very different plan. It's like we're mushing together two completely different deals. We spent millions and millions of dollars redoing Littleton Boulevard, in the late 90s to put the median in, to detach the sidewalk on the south side, to widen the sidewalk on the north side. I don't know what we're trying to fix on Littleton Boulevard. I don't know why we'd pay $200,000 to go through that again without having some idea of what's wrong and what we're doing. And I don't know why we'd combine Littleton Boulevard with a downtown plan. And I'm a little concerned about having a downtown plan where we're replicating data that we've already paid for and studies we've already paid for, and we're going down a path that's potentially different than what we did 20-some years ago to try and revitalize downtown. We don't need any more pods. We don't need any more weird ideas about what makes downtown look good. What we need is a successful downtown where somebody can open up a business and actually make some money, because if they can't make any money, then you can't have full storefronts.
Yeah. Well, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think we have a lot of common ground. Bob Gibbs and I work together. We do workshops together. We do projects together. He and I agree, I think, on most things. Pedestrian first is a big part of his approach to downtowns. And I agree that mauling streets and making it traffic circulation worse is not good for downtown. So I think we probably agree on most things. 20 years is forever in downtown evolution. And it's forever in a commercial arterial corridor. Now, I mean, you are the decision makers and we're just consultants trying to provide advice. But my advice would be that a lot has changed and a fresh look is always imperative. You know, we worked in we've worked for a lot of, we've worked for ski companies, we've worked for mountain towns, we've worked in resort communities in Hawaii and Florida, and we've worked in workaday downtowns in small towns in Wyoming. But what is common in all of those is you need to continue investing and keeping up and watching what's going on. And so I think the one thing you said that I agree with a lot of what you said, and one thing I especially agree with is that you don't propose change just to propose change. We need to analyze what is working, what's not working. That's why I said let's look at the safety data, let's look at what the pedestrian experience is like. The median out there on Littleton Boulevard has done a lot of good, in my opinion. I'm sure that that's going to show up in the safety data. And then propose only those changes that have some sort of proposed beneficial economic and other impact. My guess is you and I will always maybe, maybe not agree on every detail, but that's okay. That discussion is really important. I don't want everybody to come into the process and agree with everything we're saying. So
I was planning on going on vacation with you.
Okay,
I can recommend some great places to go.
we're getting behind.
Springs, be one of them.
Our schedule's getting close. Our time's almost up. So just, I want to make sure everybody gets a chance with a question. Jerry, you had a question.
Yes. Yeah, and thank you, Jim. I think it's a great plan. Tell me what the multi-module network map is.
Well, so it's a multimodal, and what it means is that, so transit in the Denver region is changing rapidly. I don't know if you've been watching this, but Denver, as the RTDs, they put more money into the trunk lines, the light rail and the BRT, and they're starting to talk about next tracks, what comes after fast tracks. There's going to be a de-emphasis on local circulation bus service. We're seeing it all over the region. I don't know if you're seeing it here. We haven't looked at your data yet. And so there are implications for first and last mile to the downtown station. There are implications for how does the bus service work? What are the best, if you look at people getting off the train, there are certain corridors that, there's a bunch of people going somewhere, and that's an important pedestrian corridor. Some of those sidewalks are some of the narrowest sidewalks in your town. And so what we try to do is give you a network map that says, you do have a bike and ped plan from 2011. We've got a copy of it, we've read it. It primarily dealt with those trail opportunities, and it did not deal with how do you make your downtown streets work for biking. And that's the next step. That's always the next step. We always start with trails and we look at the streets. And so the question of, well, if you really, and bikes are becoming a big deal. It's a huge opportunity for us in the Front Range. People on bikes spend money and they go places where they feel like they can ride. And so that's an opportunity to grow your downtown's retail in a year's time and to grow the downtown rents and grow just the downtown overall economics. but people have to be able to get from the trails in, and so what are the routes for that? How do we make that work? How does that work with the traffic? What about parking? And how does the parking work? How are people getting to and from the parking? How are people finding the parking? So a network map overlays those in layers, and we start looking at, here's a priority corridor that, so that when we're giving you the streetscape recommendations, we're not just saying, wouldn't this be pretty? Because I agree, it's not about making it prettier. It's like, here's a function of this street could be made a lot better because this is a street that people are using to walk and they're using for other purposes, and maybe you would run buses on it someday, and you have all of that information in a layer of so that's the idea. I'm not maybe doing it justice, but in the end, it gives you the ability to identify where your greatest priorities are because you can see the overlap and the overlay between the different modes. You know, we talk about multimodal, but intermodal is actually the most important concept. And so how do you get from one mode to the other? How well does the system work? We're going to see a lot of our first and last mile, not just bikes, but Uber and Lyft and functions like that. I don't think there's a taxi stand in downtown Littleton today. There's a lot of things that we can talk about and look at, and having those network maps will help us do that.
You answered my question. My other question is for the city. You scrapped our first plan when we went out to 7 companies for a bid. You got rid of all of them, you changed the plan, and now you've put one company, which I think is a fine company, I have no problem with the company, but you're sole sourcing this? I mean, why did it not go back out to a bid? We're talking $200,000 here.
Primarily a timing issue and quality issue. As we've talked before. Sorry. There's not a requirement for bidding on services. So
This is a contract, right? This is a contract with a consultant?
it is,
So we don't have to do a competitive bid?
not on services.
On this one,
Construction, you
on
do.
this one, we do need a competitive bid, just like we did when we went out to 4 companies in the first place. I think you're trying to game it a little bit here. This should go out to a competitive bid. You've changed the statement of work. Nothing against your company. I think you can do a great job. What you've done is you've told this company they have $200,000 they can go work with. Give us a plan. Before we went out, we told companies, bring us a plan based on our information. They didn't know it was going to be $200,000. We should go out to a bid, tell folks we have $200,000 in the budget that's been approved, and put it out to a bid instead of sole sourcing this thing. I think you're wrong with your decision to just go sole source on this. Absolutely. This is the citizens' money, council. We need to make sure we're getting the best for our buck. We've done so many studies on Littleton Boulevard and have done absolutely nothing. It's taken me 4 years just to get a doggone crosswalk, which hasn't happened yet. So, council, to go out for $200,000 on a sole source, I think is the wrong way to spend our people's money.
Any other questions?
I'll support Jerry on that.
Debbie?
Well, I don't really feel like it's completely a sole source. We did have a list of requirements, a list of kind of what we would hope to gain from this, and we, interviewed, I can't remember how many people came in, but it was pretty extensive. And I think, a lot of this is pretty refined, it's pretty specialized, it's pretty specific. So my guess is, Jerry, if we send it back out again, we get the exact same stuff that we already got. I think that if we want to, if there's a concern about the $200,000, then if there's a different number that you want to come up with, and then what that means in the scale back of the result that we would get. But I feel comfortable moving forward with this. I think part of the reason why stuff just sits around is because we don't act on things. And so again, that would be another inaction. After we've already met with, I don't know, Jocelyn, how many came in? 7? How many were?
Not exactly sure, but I think I looked through all of them, I wasn't here.
7.
It was 7.
So, I have a great deal of comfort, and I think one of the great things is that this isn't a sole source either. This is a collaboration of other professionals who have expertise in some of the specific areas we're looking for. So it's not one company saying, I can do it all for you. It's recognizing these people have expertise here and expertise here, and so bringing all of those together, because the needs that we have on this are pretty, they go from parking to walking to et cetera. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, are we comfortable with what we're hearing? And I have a great deal of comfort with that, and I'd like to see this start to move forward. And again, we talk these things to death, so.
So just on process, we do have to, this will come forward to a vote again, because this was an item that was removed prior to the adoption of the final consolidation of the last year's budget.
Correct.
And so that's why part of the issue today is it has been reconsidered. It is going to be back before us as a vote. So we will have it as a vote.
I was just going to read, in our own procedures, it says a contract may be awarded for supplies, services, or construction without competition when a department director determines in writing that there is only one source for the required supplies, services, or construction. So this is a sole source without justification, counsel.
I believe you also have to pass an ordinance, which we'd have to do to modify the budget anyway, and the ordinance has to specify why it's a sole source. Especially if it's coming out of capital projects.
So it'll be coming back before us for a vote. So give it some thought and decide how you want to proceed, and we'll have whatever information staff provides at that time for the vote. Any other information or questions regarding this? And we're getting short on time.
So just a question relating to both issues. Can we have a copy of those presentations emailed to us?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that wraps us up. Jocelyn, thank you very, very much. Jim, thank you very much. And we're going to take a brief moment before we proceed with the next item, because we want to get the technology off.
We're not. We can just go.
You ready?
There's no presentation.
You don't need technology? Okay.
You're not.
Okay, item number 3 on the agenda is really for the city manager, and we're going to proceed with that right now.
So, council, I just want to, on the heels of the mayor's 20-year vision and where we're going, and the presentations that you heard this evening, wanted to give you an update on the Enser property. It'll just take a second, because it's really as you think about it and as Puma does their work. So we believe that the contract with Endeavor will be expiring on March 1st, give or take a couple days. And that timing, I think, works very well with what you heard from Brad and JJ this evening about an opportunity to engage with the property owner. I believe there is some interest in the property owner engaging with us in some fashion. And so what we're going to be working on over the next probably month or 5 weeks, depending upon when we can get it scheduled for another study session, are different ways that we can partner and put some proposals together for the council to consider that we might want to work with the property owner. And so one of the examples I've given is some kind of design competition, where we take the conversations that have been occurring in the public through the Puma work, through the experiences that you all have with your constituents, and come up with a process by which there is a competition among architects and/or design firms and development companies to create an innovative vision, kind of the language that the council adopted through their resolution, and move forward with that in partnership with the property owner. The property owners are at least interested in that conversation and are willing to see where we go with that. So I just wanted to put that out there right now. I do think we're in a place where Endeavor is not going to move forward, and so we can all kind of relax on that. There's no guarantees, of course, but I'm confident that we're in a place that we can re-engage and start talking about what we want to see as opposed to what we don't want to see. And that's really the only way we're going to be able to move forward with the Ensor family, is not continuing to talk about what we don't want to see, but help them understand, and a developer or an architect, et cetera, about what we want to see as a community. And that's all I wanted to say. So we'll be back in after that contract has expired, and we've done some work on some options for the council.
And that's the end of the presentation for tonight. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.